Well, listen, I have never felt more love than I have this past week. I have had so many people check on me. Hey, Paul, you good? Here's my answer. God's good, right? He's good. Thank you for loving me. Some of you have heard this story before, and we're going to be in James chapter 3. I'm a couple things just to get to that passage. One, I'm a big Brene Brown fan. If you don't know who she is, she's a psychologist, social worker, sociologist. She's all these things, and she does a lot of work on shame and vulnerability. Not from necessarily a Christian perspective, but so much of it is very much in the Bible, right? And she talks about the first time that the TED Talk that made her kind of go viral. Somebody asked her if she would do a TED Talk in Houston, and she was like, sure, because that was kind of where she was from. She thought, how bad can it be, 500 people in a room, and then like the 10 people that watched it online? It's been seen 40 million times. And since she did it, that was in 2010, but she talked about how she woke up the day after, and I can't remember what she called it, but it's kind of like a vulnerability funk, and she kept thinking like, oh my gosh, what have I done, right? Like 500 people just watched that, and more people are going to see it. And she said now it's 16 years later, 40 million people. It's in all kinds of different languages all over the world. I felt that this week. Like, whew, boy, wow, what did I do last week, right? Some of you were like, what happened last week? Well, y'all were on vacation. While we were here, I sweated a lot. Man, I just shared last week just a lot of the pain I'm feeling. Nobody's fault. It's just life, right? It happens. God's still faithful. And I just wanted to set you a little bit at ease, right? I thought of this story about my daughter, Sydney, when she was, I don't know, God, is anybody else sweating? It's just me. I'll just do this the whole time. When she was, young, like 5 years old, we would give her a bath, and she lived in the coldest room in our house. I don't know why it was so drafty in that room. So we got her a space heater. By the way, parenting tip, probably shouldn't give your 4-year-old a space heater, but whatever. We got her one. We controlled it, and it would just like turn like this, and she named everything, and she named that thing the Toasty Warm, right? She loved that thing. And so whenever I'd give her a bath, she'd get out of the bathtub, I would like dry her off. I'd wrap that towel around her. She would just be shaking. And she would almost always love to do this. She'd be shaking in the bathroom, and she would walk out like this, and she would run down the hall to her room, and she'd get right in front of that Toasty Warm, and then she threw her towel off, and she went, naked! That's how I felt last week. But here's the point. She did that because there was warmth and heat, and she knew that she could be naked in front of that Toasty Warm. And I want to tell you, I love the culture that we have at the gathering. I love the culture that we're continuing to develop at the gathering. We are loved, known, and sent by Jesus to disciple the nations. And if nothing else, my job is to go first, right? And there's something about when you reveal, we're going to talk about that today, reveal a little bit about here's what's going on in my life. When you're seen and you allow people to see you, you know what happens? People come close and they say, are you good? Hey, how can I pray for you? Hey, Pastor, we love you. I appreciate that, right? I appreciate we have a culture where we can do that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you come grab the microphone and I'll be fine in a second. My body will regulate and I'll stop sweating. I have plenty of deodorant on as well. That's a good thing. I'm not suggesting that you should come and grab a microphone and just start sharing your deep, dark, intimate secrets with everybody. We had that conversation this week when he was like, I don't know how or why you would do that, but God bless you. That's what she told me. I think we have to be smart about how we share and what we share, right? But, man, you're in a place where God sees you, loves you, man, he wants the best for you, right? And I thought about that this week because we got to James chapter 3, and this is the beginning of, Pastor Tori's going to preach next week, so I'm going to like set you up, and you're going to just hit a home run, right? The next 2 weeks are going to be all about the tongue. Yeah, I know. Turn to somebody next to you and say, you probably should really listen the next 2 weeks. But this morning, and when we read it, you'll start to see how, like, why all week I kept thinking, oh my gosh, God, what did I do last week? This morning's about teachers. Teachers using their words to influence. Because our words have power and they influence people. And I kept thinking, like, oh my gosh, did I influence people incorrectly last week? Well, no, that's just the devil, right? Our tongues, the words we speak have power. We can influence people. So this morning, what I hope you get from this teaching is encouragement. The Bible says, you'll hear it next week, that this, don't touch your tongue, that would be gross, but this thing in your mouth is set on fire by hell. Now turn to somebody and say, I understand you a lot better now. The point is, God, and He wants to purify this vessel so that it offers praise and encouragement, praise to God and encouragement to the people around us. Some of you, and you'll hear these testimonies as we move forward. Some of you are living right now the answer to prayers that you have prayed with your words. And God has begun to fulfill what you have spoken, right? So for the next couple of weeks, it's going to be easy for you to start thinking like, ooh, I don't know if I ever want to say another word. Apparently the tongue can do a lot of damage. Oh, but the tongue, y'all, can bring so much life. So much life. Now, James chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. I'll just read it, and then we'll work through it. We'll wrap up with the story at the end. I think you're going to love it. Just let's speak it in faith. Turn to somebody next to you and say, I'm going to love this. What could go wrong, right? Here we go. Not many of you should become teachers. This is what James writes. My fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. I felt that. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. Just, by the way, that word perfect means mature. So, like, he's not saying, hey, you could be perfect. No, he's saying, like, if you can guard your mouth, that is a sign of maturity, right? When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we could turn the whole animal. I don't have time to tell the story about riding a demon-possessed horse. That's for another time. But that bit did not work. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they're steered by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. These actually happened. I wanted to show some videos of just like pastors making huge mistakes as they were preaching, but most of them aren't. You can't share them in a family-friendly service. Not because the pastors are bad, it's just what they say is, huh. So I picked out the ones that I can say that will make Wendy not cringe, I hope. Here we go. These actually happened, y'all, in church services around the world. In a child dedication service, the pastor said the history of child sacrifice goes back many centuries. Oops. The pastor meant to say enemies, but instead he said that God has given you power over all your enemies. Okay, I'm 1 for 2 because Wendy just cringed right there. A church had 2 men in the church whose wives were expecting. And both of those men's last names were Loose. Loose. And the pastor got up and asked the church to be praying for these loose women. That one took a while to set up, but it was good. That was good. This is my favorite one. Don't look at Wendy when I say it. Here we go. The pastor, this sounds like something I would say, babe. The pastor was talking about how potters would fix impure pottery with wax to hide imperfections. And this is what he said. The problem with many believers is that we have wax in our cracks. Yeah. That was cringy. And then there was the pastor that meant to say the word biopsy when he asked the church to please pray for Mrs. Jones, who recently went in for an autopsy. Listen, the point here is that words matter, right? Words mean. Can you imagine all of our friends going, wait, what? What happened? But these are just a reminder that we need to be aware of what we're saying, but also how what we're saying impacts the people that are listening. True story, in the last week, I was reminded of this at my house as I had an interaction with an AI robot named Alexa. So I wrote it down as soon as it happened. Wendy is a witness that this legitimately took place in our house. Do y'all talk to your devices? I mean, you're supposed to. They're listening. You might as well have a conversation. I'm going to read to you word for word. Here's how it went. I said, play instrumental worship from Apple Music everywhere, because our network is called Everywhere. And she said, I can't find instrumental worship music on Apple Music. And I said, play instrumental worship from Apple Music everywhere. Why do we say the exact same thing? And she said, I can't find instrumental worship music on Apple Music. And then I said, kind of half joking, but I think I meant it, you are a liar. And she said, word for word, that's a pretty harsh accusation coming from someone who just asked me to play instrumental worship music. I may or may not still be a prime member. I am. There's a lot of ways we could go with that, right? I've got some ideas about how I would like to teach about, like, we need to have the freedom to be able to be ourselves, right? Like, if I'm frustrated, I want to say she's a liar. I need to have the freedom to say that. But that was like AI's version of, I thought you were a Christian, all right? And I felt it. But for our point here, why would she even say that? Why would it even say that? Because what I was saying wasn't matching up, right? In its mind, that just didn't compute. Like, wait a second, you're asking me to play worship music and now you're calling me a liar. That doesn't go together. And that's kind of what James is getting at here. He's been kind of circling around this topic the whole letter. Like, our actions need to match our faith. What we say needs to match what we do. And now, he is not circling any longer. Today, I'm the one on trial, because he's talking to, not many of you should be teachers, and I'm the one teaching. Next week, you're going to feel it, because he's going to talk about the tongue and how we should probably not praise God with it and also curse others with it. He's going to be playing the part of Alexa. Wait a second, that's a weird thing coming out of your mouth. Today, I want us to talk about just impact. I want you to just, if you're taking notes, just jot down a couple of these points. Number one, our words carry more weight than we think. So when he said not many of you should become teachers, he's not discouraging teachers. You can go back to Ephesians chapter 4, and Paul talks about that teachers are one of the gifts that God gives to the church. I mean, I am a gift to you. I'll say it one more time. I am a gift to you. Yeah. I had to say that to Wendy a few times as well before she really warmed up to the idea. But now we've been married for a long time, so she gets it. But this gift of teaching is a gift to the body, so that the body can be equipped to do the works of ministry that you've been called to do, right? So he's not like, being in conflict with Paul. Like, hey, Paul said that teachers were a gift, but I'm telling you, teachers should stop teaching. That's not what he's saying. What he is saying is that influence increases accountability. And that as a teacher, I have influence. When you teach, you have influence. And we need to be aware of that. The greater the influence, the greater the responsibility. I feel like somebody should probably quote out loud that famous line from Spider-Man. Nobody? With great power. I mean, I know I'm a teacher, and I'm teaching you that my words hold weight, but I'm a little disappointed right now. It's fine. He's kidding. I'm not really disappointed. I just thought we'd have people that would. Some other verses to jot down. James chapter 1:19. It says this: with great power. No, it doesn't say that, y'all. It's on the screen. Look, it doesn't say that. I'm just seeing. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. How did your grandparents say that verse? Did they ever look at you and say, listen, don't forget that God gave you 1 and 2, right? Like, be slow to speak. Listen more than you speak. That's what James is getting at. James 1:26 says that like a faith that can't control the tongue is not mature. He says those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves. Don't miss those last few words. And their religion is what? Worthless. Y'all, it matters what we say. It might matter more what we don't say. When I was in seminary and they were teaching us how to preach, and some of you are like, you need to go back. Maybe I do. When I was in seminary, they were teaching me how to preach. This is what he said. You will need to pray more about what you don't say than what you do. I'm still working on that one, right? I tend to want to say all of it. But the point is, we can say words that are worthless. We can say words that don't bring life. Jesus mentioned this in Matthew chapter 12. I want you to hear all of this. He says, make a tree good, and its fruit will be good. Where am I at? Make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. God, we could stop there. You brood of vipers. Jesus, let me ask you a question. If Jesus just said that the fruit is proof of what's in the heart, if Jesus is getting ready to talk about, we're going to get into this passage, and he's going to say that we're going to give an account for every careless word. If Jesus said that, do you think that Jesus was shooting from the hip here, or was he thinking about what he was saying? Yeah, when he said, you brood of vipers, he was not crashing out. He was calling it like it was. You who are evil, how can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. If you ever want to Google a sermon series to listen to, Andy Stanley does a sermon series called It Came From Within. It's like, like the swamp creature that comes up from out of the swamp. And he's like, he got tired of people always like, they would say something bad and they would be like, oh, I have no idea where that came from. So he got up as a pastor and said, I know where it came from, your heart. Because that's what Jesus says. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. Before we get to the last two verses, you can just keep them up there. How many of you have storage facilities? Anybody? Have you noticed this principle? I'm talking to two of you. You can't go into your storage unit and pull out what you didn't put in there. Wouldn't that be great, though? Wouldn't that be a great superpower? Put in all of your old clothes and then pull out a brand new wardrobe, right? But you can only pull out of it what you put in it. And that's what Jesus is getting at here. You're going to bring out of you what you have stored in you. That's why what we listen to, what we engage with, it matters. Because it gets in us, and then eventually it comes out of us. And then he says this, but I tell you that everyone will have to give an account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken. Your translation might say careless. The word for careless and the word for empty, literally in the Greek, means barren. It means that you and I have the potential to speak words that cannot produce life. And we will give an account for those words. For by your words, Jesus says, you'll be acquitted, and by your words, you will be condemned. Jesus says we're going to give an account for every careless word. Now, I told you that this was probably more about me because I'm the one holding the microphone, but I want to make sure we're all on this together. Parents, you teach. Grandparents teach. If you're a group leader or a team leader in this church, you teach. Coaches, teach. Friends, teach. Everyone who has influence teaches. And everyone has influence over somebody. Your words matter. What we just read from what Jesus said in Matthew 12 reminds us of this point. Our words expose what is happening in our hearts. Which is why some of you are like, I don't know what happened last week, but I'm going to go watch that video. It's on YouTube. You can go find it. After last week, that's why some of you would call me and say, like, or text me, are you good? Because my words last week opened my heart to you. Right? That's what our words do. They expose what's happening in our heart, for good or for bad. Jesus just said that. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. So your tongue is not the problem. The tongue is a thermometer. It tells us what's happening on the inside. You didn't accidentally become harsh. You didn't accidentally become encouraging. You cultivated it. Because the words that we speak are fruit. The heart is the root. So here's some questions to ask yourself. What do my conversations sound like? What comes out when I'm under pressure? Right? When we get squeezed, what comes out? Would the people closest to me describe my words as life-giving? I just made a note that those questions can cause us to feel some fear, right? Like, I don't know if I like the answers. I don't know if anybody needs to see what's in my heart. And that calls for courage. I love this. Courage comes from a Latin word that means heart. But the original meaning was this: to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. That's courage. And if you've ever been in a dating relationship and been the first to say how you really feel, you know what courage is, right? Because you had to have the courage to say, I'm telling you what I really feel with my whole heart. It makes us vulnerable. But then James goes on and says that our words can steer an entire life. I love the pictures that he uses. A horse's bit, it's really small. You don't really notice it. But that small thing directs the whole animal. He talks about a ship, how it's small, how it's hidden. I hadn't even noticed it before I read it this time. But he talks about how a ship can be driven. It can be driven by wind. It can be driven by a storm, but it can only be steered by the rudder. Right? As long as you got the rudder, you can harness all the power of what's happening so that you can steer that ship. Your tongue is like that. Often our lives are directed by small things. One conversation, one apology, one encouragement, one criticism, one careless comment can actually redirect someone's future. I don't have any grand illusion that I'm a great singer, but in my ministry I've led worship, and so that requires a microphone, and it also requires that you sing. for me, it requires I try to get everybody to sing so I can back away. But it took me years to have any kind of confidence singing in public in a microphone, because when I was in high school, somebody asked me to sing a solo in the church choir, and all I can remember about that interaction is my best friend going, "Paul?" And that one, he didn't mean it that way. He's just being a teenager. But that one comment steered my life. Man, what we say matters, y'all. It's either giving life or it's taking it away. Proverbs 18:21, you've probably heard this verse. It says, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. You've heard people tell you that your words have the power of life or death. They do. I want to be very clear. The power that the tongue has to give life or death is about what happens on the inside of people. Parents, oh man. First off, lots of grace and compassion, because I've been a parent. I'm still a parent, but I'm still a parent. Will, I'm still your dad. But when they were small, y'all, exhaustion's a thing, right? Can I get an amen from the parents of small children? So sometimes, like when you're tired, do you also say things that you really didn't mean? Like this whole message could be making you feel some kind of way right now. God gets it. He sees your exhaustion. He loves you. It's all good, right? God's power to redeem is so much greater than our power to speak bad things, right? Sometimes what we start to think that we have power over all kinds of things that we have no power over, but you always have power over the inside of somebody else. Not that you would ever say this, but some of you were raised by parents that would say things like, "I wish we'd never had you." That kills a kid. There's power in those words. Some of you are raised by parents that said, "Man, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." And that kid can go fail at anything and know that they're loved. There's power of life and death in your tongue, in the tongue, in the words that we speak. All that to say, last thing is that God is not looking for impressive voices. I can think of a bunch of better preachers than me. They're on the internet and YouTube. You should probably watch them. But he's not looking for impressive voices. What he's looking for are transformed hearts. Hearts that are committed to him, because he knows if my heart's committed to him, then the words that I'm speaking are coming from a heart that's committed to him. That's what he's looking for, and he's looking for the same thing in you. James begins with teachers because teaching carries influence. Our culture rewards sound bites and reels and clips and viral moments and personalities, but God's kingdom is not about sound bites. God's kingdom is about sound minds, sound doctrine, sound character, and sound lives. Eventually, gifted words without godly character collapse under their own weight. And so we've watched it again and again. Celebrity culture in churches. Like there's a whole generation that's not so sure they want to go to church anymore, because they have had a steady diet of men and women in positions of leadership and power and authority in the churches collapsing from a lack of character. And so there's a whole generation that's like, I don't know if I want that. I get it. And I could tell you story after story after story of those collapses. But you can find those anywhere. I think the greatest platform is still integrity. So I'd rather finish this morning with a story that I found in a book called Steps by John Ortberg. It's kind of a long story. It's too long for me to memorize, so I'm just going to read it to you. And it's a beautiful illustration of what can happen when somebody understands the influence of their words, right? I think a lot of leaders like to hear themselves talk. They like the power that they can exert over a group of people with their words. But Jesus is after people who understand the influence more than the power. Because when you understand the influence of your words, guess what? You don't have to have any power. You just have influence through your words. And that's what you're going to hear here. This is a story of a young Tutsi named Benyoni. Benyoni means little bird, and he was called that because despite poverty and hunger, he was constantly singing and whistling and making music. His family couldn't afford a guitar, so he made himself one. He had a joyful faith that breathed life into others and made him naturally rise to the top. He was elected president of his class at boarding school. When the Dutch evangelist Corrie ten Boom came to his region, she insisted that he lead the singing at her meetings because whenever he sang, everybody else just naturally joined in. He eventually went on to teach at a school and was eventually made the headmaster of that school. This was happening during the Rwandan genocide when the Hutus were trying to kill the Tutsis in that nation. And one day, 5 young armed Hutu soldiers came to Benyoni's school with orders to execute all the teachers. Sidebar: the enemy will always try to silence the voice of a teacher with a pure heart because the words of that teacher have influence. Benyoni tried hard to dissuade them, but they weren't having it. They led him and the 11 young teachers under him away from the school so that they could execute them out of the sight of students. One of the teachers broke down. "Please kill me first," he begged the soldiers. "I couldn't bear to see my friends die like this." "Oh no," said Benyoni calmly. "I am the leader. They will kill me first, and you will see what a glorious thing it is to go home to be with God." Then Benyoni turned to the soldiers and asked, "May I pray for you?" The soldiers were not expecting this, and after some discussion, they said yes. Benyoni's teachers had great confidence in his prayers and hoped that perhaps he could pray them out of this situation. But when he prayed, it wasn't for their deliverance. He asked God to give them courage and to watch over their families, but mostly he prayed for the soldiers. "They're about to do a terrible thing," he told God, "and will soon face unbearable guilt. Please send someone to tell them about Jesus so that they can know forgiveness." When they got over the hill to the place of execution, Benyoni had one last request. "Before you kill us, I would like to sing one final song." This as well was unprecedented. Murder victims do not normally ask to sing to their executioners. By now the soldiers had begun to be troubled. How can we kill such a man? But their young lieutenant insisted if the teachers were not executed, the soldiers would be killed when they returned to base. "Yes," he told Benyoni, "you may sing one song." And Benyoni began to sing an old hymn that he loved very much. "Out of my bondage, sorrow, and night, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come. Into thy freedom, gladness, and light. Jesus, I come to thee." His teachers gained courage and started to sing with him all the verses until they came to the last one. "Out of the fear and dread of the tomb, Jesus, I come. Jesus, I come. Into the joy and light of thy home. Jesus, I come to thee." And then those 12 young men were executed. And that was the last song of Little Bird. The story of Benyoni's life and death are told by a friend of his, a woman that the author of the book knew named Marty Ensign. "I wondered," said the author, "when I first heard it, how could we possibly know this story if all the teachers had been killed?" And Marty explained, "It happens that the soldiers returned to their base and went to a bar to get as drunk as they could, as fast as they could, to forget what had just happened. But their lieutenant didn't touch a drop. In his guilt and despair, he had hit rock bottom. He waited until night and found an old Quaker teacher who lived there. 'I must know,' he said, 'what would enable men to die like that.' And she told him about Jesus, and how he, like Little Bird, died offering forgiveness to those who killed him and offers forgiveness still. The lieutenant became a follower of Jesus and started Bible studies and told the story of Little Bird. After a few months, the lieutenant was also executed. But by then, it was too late to stop the story. Little Bird went to his grave with his song ringing indelibly in the ears of his murderers, and decades later, it haunts the world still. If Little Bird had waited until the crisis hit to find a faith that could enable him to face death with such a spirit, it would have been too late. It was his extraordinary life before the crisis came that allowed him to meet it as he did. There is a reality that for some reason, very often it is the people who are in desperate situations, prisoners, the addicted, the persecuted, the poor, the dying, who are moved to reach toward it with such intensity of spirit and unity of purpose that they will not be denied. But the rest of us lead lives of quiet desperation and go to our graves with our song still in us. Don't wait for the crisis. And I would simply add, start now to live a life that will give weight to the words you speak, or in the case of Little Bird, sing. That is the kind of influence that James is calling us to here at the beginning of chapter 3. Not to fear holding a microphone and speaking words that could influence people, but to boldly embrace a life before the microphone that will give weight to the words you speak when you hold it. And if you never have a microphone, that you would be the people that when you open your mouth and speak, those around you who may not even agree with what you say would be impacted by the weight of the words that you speak. That is my prayer for the gathering. It's a lot, Lord. It's a lot. But I thank you that you have promised us that the words we speak don't have to be careless. They don't have to be empty. They don't have to be impotent. They can be words that speak life, that create in someone else a hope for a future that you've called them to. And so I pray simply this, God, as we wrap this morning up, that you would forgive me for the times that I have taught things, said things that have influenced people away from your goodness. And I'm not alone. I know there are people in this room right now that they're like, we're just playing over in our mind, like the last time we stood in front of our classroom, the last thing we said to the students that we lead, the last thing we said to our children. And maybe God, the greatest example of forgiveness is going to be us asking them to forgive us. And we commit our words to you. We commit our hearts to you. And we ask that you would move in such a radical way in our hearts that it would transform the weight of the words that we speak. And that would be the vehicle you use to bring life to the souls of those who hear them. We pray it, God, in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.